Hey guys, it's Riley back again with another YouTube video, and in today's video we are going to be doing a bodybuilder tier list. Now, to clear up any confusion, I released this same video a couple nights ago and it was just a mess. I didn't have a real way I was ranking the bodybuilders. Some of them I was ranking on physique, some of them I was ranking on just how I like them. So today we're redoing the video, trying to rank them all in one order. So just a disclaimer, just to not irritate anybody, we will be ranking these people based on how much I personally like their physique and how I think they are as people. Now, this does not mean if I put one person above a different one, that that person's physique is greater than the other one. This is all based on my opinions on how I like their physiques and how I like them as people. With that out of the way, and we understand the ranking system, let's get right into it. Okay, to start off with a hot take, first we have Lee Priest. Now, I know I'm gonna offend some Lee Priest fans out there, but personally, I'm gonna say I am not a big Lee Priest fan. We've all seen the videos of Lee Priest at 16. It's very obvious he was taking so many substances. I don't believe for a second that was just genetics. And at that point, we gotta ask ourselves, how long was he taking things? Also, if you go and find the Hostile live stream where Lee Priest and Sam Sulek have a conversation, Lee Priest suggests to take a pint of ice cream and let it melt, scoop a bunch of protein powder in it, mix it up, and drink it, and that as your protein and calories on a bulk. I wouldn't be an advocate for that. I think that's a very, very unhealthy way to do things, and you're also not getting complete protein. It's just whey. That's all you're suggesting. So for that, I'm gonna have to put Lee Priest in the C tier. Next up, we got Frank Zane. Now, many people consider Frank Zane as one of the most aesthetic bodybuilders of all time. I don't know much about him other than his book that I read. I seem to agree with a lot of his training methods. But for me, it seems like even these days, your classic physique guys on the Olympia stage are still a bit bigger than Frank Zane was. So I love Frank Zane. I think he's got some good things to teach. I would highly suggest go reading his book. I will put him in A tier. Next up, we got Tom Platz. Now, Tom Platz is a great example of somebody not having ideal bodybuilding genetics, overcoming it with hard work. When you hear not ideal genetics for bodybuilding, typically you hear out there Tom Platz and Dorian Yates. Now, Dorian Yates did have a more successful career than Tom Platz did, but I think in the long run and the legacy Tom Platz has made, I think he is a big inspiration for many lifters in my generation. It's hard for me to go on TikTok or Instagram and not see a Tom Platz leg day edit. And I see why. I understand why. I mean, Tom Platz was an animal, and the videos he posts on Instagram now of him as older talking about philosophical views, they're really inspiring, and there's so much you can take away from it. So go follow Tom Platz on Instagram. The videos are super inspirational. Go follow me on Instagram since you're already there at OtterBoxer101. And for this, Tom Platz, S tier. Next up, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Come on, guys. It's Arnold. You know, love him or hate him on his views politically or his opinions, it's Arnold. Bodybuilding wouldn't be bodybuilding without Arnold. We gotta put him in S tier. Next up, we got Jay Cutler, 4-time Mr. Olympia. It's hard to say that Jay Cutler isn't one of the greatest to ever step on the bodybuilding stage. There's so many things to take away from Jay Cutler. Obviously, the quad stomp was one of the most badass moments in bodybuilding history and one of the most recognizable moments in bodybuilding history. His rivalry with Ronnie was probably the greatest rivalry we will ever see in bodybuilding and there's ever been. Jay Cutler, S tier. Next up, Ronnie Coleman. It ain't nothing but a peanut. S tier. Next up, we got Mike Mentzer. Mike Heavy Duty Menser. If you follow me on Instagram, if you follow me on YouTube, you already know Mike Menser, in my opinion, was the greatest bodybuilder to ever do it. The first bodybuilder to get a perfect score on the Mr. Universe stage. He was taken from us too soon. An absolute legend, Mike Menser, S tier. I know it's a hot take. I know it bothers people that I say that. I truthfully believe Mike Menser was the greatest bodybuilder ever to live. I don't think there's anyone that is ever compared to him. The 1980 Mr. Olympia, Arnold's comeback year, that should have been Mike Menser's Olympia win, wherein I'm pretty sure he only got third. I think he should have won that. And most people, even if they don't think Menser should have won it, they don't think Arnold should have won it. The greatest bodybuilding upset in history. Now, while you're here, while you're listening to me ramble, a lot of people think Menser was a meth user. And when you read his journals from before he died, he admitted to using amphetamines, not methamphetamines. This means Menser was more likely using Adderall than meth. Now, Menser was an open drug user, and I believe he also talks about using cocaine, but he did not die from meth, as people paint it up to be. Mike Menser died from heart problems. Now, this could be related to steroid usage. His brother also died from heart problems, but his brother also was a steroid user, and his dad died from the same heart problems. So, his dad wasn't using steroids, so it's hard to say if it was the roids that killed him or if it was a genetic heart problem. But it's more likely he died from a genetic heart problem over meth. Okay, rant over, let's get on with the next people. Next up, we got Gunter. I'm not going to try to say his last name. I've always known him as the Smile Guy because I think that video is awfully hilarious. I definitely don't think he's talked about in the bodybuilding scene as much as he should be. I mean, he never had that Olympia win, but I'd like to think in my mind he came pretty close. I like his physique. He's a perfect example of the mass monster era. And I think he brought a very good, positive sense of energy to bodybuilding that I personally look up to. But just because he's not Menser, he's not Coleman, I'm going to put Gunter in A tier. Next up, we got 6-time Mr. Olympia Dorian Yates. Now, I personally never really got into Dorian Yates that much. I watched him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I wasn't overly enthused with anything he had to say or any of his points or his personality. He was probably, if not for sure, no, we'll say probably the biggest bodybuilder ever to step on stage. And especially, he was what went from the golden era to the mass monster era. Dorian Yates is no doubt a legend and one of the most iconic bodybuilders of all time. For me, he's on the border between A tier and S tier. He's right on that line. But for now, I'm going to give him S tier. Next up, we got Kevin Levrone. Who doesn't love a good underdog story? I mean, every time Kevin Levrone placed second on Olympia stage, he looked like he was going to cry. It was truthfully heartbreaking. And him making his comeback as of recently, a couple of years ago, what was it, 2018 maybe? I'm not completely sure, don't quote me on that. Coming back at this old of an age, I think he was pushing 50. He looks damn good, the best 50-year-old I've ever seen. Kevin Levrone, I mean, a perfect example of perfect genetics and hard work put together. He just never was able to get that Olympia win. For me personally, I'm going to put Kevin Levrone in A tier. Next up, we got Flex Wheeler. Now, I don't know much about Flex Wheeler as a person, but his physique never did anything to me. His era of bodybuilding was about the same part of my favorite era of bodybuilding, but I never looked at his physique and it never did anything crazy for me. But I understand he's a legend. I understand he is one of the greatest to do it. For that, Flex Wheeler, A tier. Next up, we got Marcus Rule. Now, I like Marcus Rule. There's not much to be said about him. And I think that alone speaks for itself. I don't think he left behind this crazy legacy. I know there's probably a million Marcus Rule fans out there, but you don't hear his name brought up that much anymore. He obviously had a great physique, one of the better physiques of the Mass Monster era, but he personally just didn't do much for me. I don't hear many people talking about him. For that, I'm going to put Marcus Rule in the B tier. Now, just for goofs, I made this bodybuilding tier list, and I wanted to get people from all eras. I wanted to get people from the 70s to today's competitions, and I wanted to throw some fitness influencers in there in the middle. So next up, we got Rich Piana. Rich Piana put himself in the bodybuilding world. He put himself right on the face of it, even though he never was really all that successful of a bodybuilder. He was the first of a generation of fitness influencers, and he inspired so many people to get into the gym. His brand, I really like his brand. They have nice clothes, shakers, pre-workouts. I believe it's 5% nutrition. I like him as a guy. I think he was funny with the fact of good fucking morning, little cookie after the gym. For that, Rich Piana, A tier. Next up, we got Mike O'Hearn. Now, as for Mike O'Hearn, back in the day, you know when he was a kid, he had a very successful bodybuilding career ahead of him. He could have been one of the greatest in my opinion. To my knowledge, I'm not completely sure, I don't think Mike O'Hearn ever stepped on the Mr. Olympia stage. And if it was just his physique and his bodybuilding legacy, I would want to put him in A tier. But the thing is, he's a fake natty now. He has to sit here and be, oh, I'm natural, I'm 100% natural. When you're pushing 50, you might already be 50, and you have a physique better than 99.99% of humans. We all know Mike O'Hearn's natural. There's not a doubt in my mind Mike O'Hearn's natural by any stretch of the imagination, and no one can convince me otherwise. But for just the random beefs and the horrible takes he has on training these days, he's tarnished his own legacy. Mike O'Hearn, C tier. Next up, we got Greg Doucette. Now, a lot of people like to hate on Greg Doucette because he's got that parrot voice. He screams at the camera, "They're shredded a shit ton of it." I get it. I personally believe I've tried some of Greg's products. I've tried the Harder Than Last Time products. I like all the products from the brand. I don't think he's a snake oil salesman. I think he's selling real products that he uses himself. Greg was a world record holder in the bench press and held a deadlift world record, but that was for like most weight moved in a minute or something with reps. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But world record in the deadlift and the bench press and an IFBB pro. Guys, the IFBB in the eyes of bodybuilding is like the NFL to football. Like, the IFBB is nothing to spit at, even if you never stepped on the Olympia stage. Coach Greg was my biggest inspiration to get into lifting. I probably wouldn't be where I'm at now if it wasn't for Coach Greg's videos. And for that, we gotta put him in S tier. Next up, 5-time Classic Physique winner Chris Bumstead. 5-time as of right now. I don't know what's gonna happen down the road. Chris Bumstead has probably been the most famous bodybuilder since Arnold. I mean, with his brands and his followings online, everyone knows Chris Bumstead, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple years he will surpass Arnold in popularity. Chris Bumstead has so much heart into the sport. You can feel how much he cares about it, and he has put himself as a GOAT status. We're going to be putting Chris Bumstead S tier. Next up, we got Ramon Dino. Dino? I'm not sure. Now, this is my second hot take of the video. First one being Menser is the greatest to ever do it. I think Ramon is the most overrated bodybuilder right now, and I think his career is coming to an end. As you know, this year at the 2024 Arnold Classic, you had Ramon Dino versus Urs Kalahesky on stage battling for first place to win the Arnold Classic. And Wesley Vissers came out of nowhere, shook the world. I was there, I know, everyone was shook. and placed first for the 2024 Arnold Classic. The way I see things, Urs Kalahesky was blessed and gifted with shape, and Ramon Dino was gifted with size. I don't think Ramon's shape is perfect for classic physique, and you can't fix that. Although for Urs, he can keep putting on size and chasing down the #1 spot. I thought at last year's Mr. Olympia that Urs would place second, Chris Bumstead first, Ramon in third. But I have to say I was wrong. I got that wrong. But I think this year we will see Urs surpassing Ramon in the placings. And as for the biggest threat to Chris Bumstead right now, it's the uncertainty on Wesley Vissers. Coming into the 2024 Mr. Olympia, you have Chris Bumstead as the reigning champion, and the biggest threat will be Wesley Vissers. We just saw Wesley Vissers beat Urs and Ramon at the Arnold Classic. I'm going to say this next Olympia, Chris Bumstead will still be first, Wesley Vissers will be the runner-up, and we'll see Urs finally pass Ramon for third place. I know to some of you might think I sound crazy, but I think this is gonna happen. If I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong, but it just seems to make sense. I think this man is done. He's never gonna have the classic physique title he chases. For that, Ramon Dino is B tier. Urs Kalahesky, it only makes sense. Just put Chris Bumstead in S tier. Just put Ramon in B tier. Urs right in the middle, A tier. Next up, we got Wesley Vissers. Now, it feels so weird to sit here and say Wesley Vissers deserves A tier when 95% of bodybuilding fans did not know who he was a few months ago. But he has really proven himself, and he preached a very similar message I preached. I sat here being a big Mensa enthusiast and said, I want to bring back the look of the golden era bodybuilders. So when I saw this new guy come up, well, not new, but you know what I mean, this new threat to the scene come up and place first in the Arnold Classic saying, I'm bringing back the golden era, it was like, holy shit, you're saying the same shit I'm saying. Wesley Vissers is such a question mark in my mind right now. Really? He could fall flat on the Olympia stage. We don't know, but he could also make such a crazy legacy for himself that no one can even foresee right now. I mean, I can't say I think he's better than Chris Bumstead. I can say I think he's better than Ramon Dino. As for the Arnold Classic, he just beat Urs, but I think Urs has this chance to creep up. So Wesley Vissers is going to be A tier. I'm really excited to see what happens in his future. Next up, we got Hadi Chubin. I can't say his last name. You know, I'm not a massive fan of the open class bodybuilders of today. I really am one of the people that follows classic physique. If you follow me, you know I'm training to compete in classic physique. But you can't take away the legacy or the hard work that goes into these guys' training. You know, we got Samson Dada now, and you know, I think he's gonna reign heavy and not let Hadi creep up. For that, we are going to put Hadi in B tier. Next up, we got Samson Dada. I think Samson is the face of open bodybuilding right now. I think he's veering on that line of S tier, but I don't think Samson's been as dominant in open class bodybuilding right now as Chris Bumstead has been in classic physique. And I do think Chris Bumstead is more popular than Samson. Based on the followers and the videos and what people talk about. Samson's 32. I think by time in these next, let's say, 8 years, I think he could wrap up his career with a bow and fall into the tiers of one of these greats. You'll hear Samson's name with Ronnie, Coleman, and Jay Cutler and Arnold. Right now, I think he's got some more work to be done before, in my eyes, he gets to S tier. So for me, I am going to put Samson in A tier. Next up is Phil Heath. Now, I think Phil Heath has a very interesting legacy in the bodybuilding world. How he was almost this kind of villain during his reign. I've watched the podcasts. I mean, I know of Phil Heath. I got an idea of who he is. I'm just not a fan. I'm not entertained as much. You know, I would put him more in the B tier, but he's got 7 Mr. Olympia wins. He very well deserves to be in the S tier. But just based on how I feel about his physique and how I like him like as a person, which because that's how we're ranking these guys, I'm gonna put Phil Heath in A tier. Next up, we got Sam Sulek. I think it's so interesting that we put Sam Sulek, I have him on this list, because it is crazy that somebody who has not even made their debut show is being talked about in the eyes of being one of the greats. You know, I think Sam Sulek could have a very fortunate and bright future in bodybuilding, but right now we don't know. He's never even stepped on stage. Now, Sam Sulek fans are crazy. They glaze him so hard. They're saying he's gonna be the greatest ever to do it, and there's no one like Sam. I am a very big Sam Sulek fan. I watch every video he posts. I have hundreds of hours into watching Sam Sulek. And I love him. I love his videos. I love the things he preaches. I love his physique. But I'm not going to sit here and say we know how he's going to stand in bodybuilding competitions, because we don't. We don't know how he's going to do yet. Just for the impact he's made on the generation, just for what he's accomplished, I think Sam Sulek deserves to be an A tier. He seems like such a chill guy. I agree with pretty much everything he says. I mean, I do feel he deserves to be there. So that is my bodybuilder tier list. Here is the results. Here's what I think. Overall, I'm feeling pretty happy with this tier list. I like the placings. I like how I've ranked these people. Well, obviously, this is just my opinion. I'm not standing here saying that Tom Platz was a greater bodybuilder than Phil Heath. That's not what I'm saying. This is just what I think of the guy's physiques, how I like them. But I made this tier list. I went on the website. I looked for a bodybuilder tier list. I felt like there was not a really well-rounded tier list yet, so I made this one myself. If you would like to go try it, I'll link it in the description. Like I said, I made it. If you want to share your results and what you did on the quiz, share it to me at OtterBoxer101 on Instagram. You can send it to me. You post a YouTube video. You can tag me in it. I don't care. I love interacting with you guys. So if you want to send me something, if you want to discuss about what's here, drop a comment. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, leave your questions, comments, concerns down below. Check out my other socials, and I will catch you next time. Peace.